Hey everyone, welcome back! So today, we are literally tearing up the old economic rulebook. We're looking at a complete blueprint, a hyper-fast development guide specifically designed for developing nations. It's called the Asian Leapfrog Strategy, and trust me, it is a total game changer.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Consider the stark contrast between these two paths. For the longest time, the Western path to prosperity was an incredibly slow, grinding journey. We're talking 150 years for Britain, 100 years for the US, relying heavily on coal, railways, and centuries of factory building. But then you look at the Asian path. They completely shattered that timeline. In just a few decades, they leapfrogged straight into digital tech, mobile networks, and high-tech industries, completely bypassing that grueling, centuries-long industrial phase.
So, how exactly did they pull this off? Well, here is our roadmap for today's analysis. We're going to bust the myth of the slow industrial revolution, dive into the magic of this leapfrogging strategy, look at hard evidence of Asia's transformation, break down their key success factors, and finally, outline the exact steps developing countries can take today. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the myth of the slow industrial revolution, and why the West's assumptions were just plain wrong. You know, for centuries, the West operated on this one very rigid assumption. To get rich, you have to suffer. As we mentioned, it took Britain 150 years and America a century of building heavy machinery, mining coal, and forcing mass urbanization. And because of that, old-school economists just assumed every single country on Earth would have to repeat this exhausting, century-long process to achieve any real prosperity. They thought it was the only way. But that brings us to Section 2, the magic of the leapfrog strategy. This is basically an economic cheat code. So, the crucial point here is the concept of leapfrogging. Think of it like this. It's a process where a developing nation intentionally skips over intermediate stages of development and jumps straight to the most advanced technology available. You don't waste your time or money recreating the past, you literally jump straight into the future. It's brilliant. Here's the classic example, and it is so simple but so incredibly impactful. Instead of spending decades and billions of dollars dragging copper landline cables across mountains and valleys, a lot of nations in Asia and Africa just skipped it. They completely bypassed that stage and jumped straight to mobile phone networks. And what's amazing is that they took this genius concept and applied it to entire eras of economic development. Moving on to Section 3, we need to look at the actual proof. Let's explore how 4 miracle nations turned this theory into reality. First up, South Korea. Their timeline is absolutely staggering. Picture this. In 1950, the country's in ruins from war, facing extreme poverty, poorer than many sub-Saharan nations at the time. But look at the leap. By the 1980s, they aggressively moved into heavy industries like steel and shipbuilding. And then, right when the West thought they might slow down, boom, the 2000s hit. They dominate broadband and semiconductors. They basically compressed hundreds of years of history into less than 70 years. Incredible. And then we have Singapore. Their founding father, Lee Kuan Yew, famously called their 1965 independence a moment of anguish. And it really was. They had absolutely no natural resources, no land, no industry. He even cried on national television. But today, their GDP per capita actually beats out massive powerhouses like the US and Germany. So how did a tiny island with zero resources pull that off? Well, they didn't bother building basic textile factories. Instead, they positioned themselves as an indispensable global port. They aggressively chased foreign direct investment, relentlessly funded STEM education, and leapfrogged straight into high-value tech and finance. They went from the third world to the first world in just a single generation. And this brilliantly illustrates our next example on a much more massive scale, China. While the West was still awkwardly debating contactless payments and swiping physical credit cards, China just leaped right over them. Using super apps like WeChat and Alipay, they went straight to a cashless society. I mean, even street performers there take donations via QR codes. They compressed 2 centuries of Western industrialization into just 4 decades. Now, let's talk about Indonesia. To put this into perspective, their digital economy is projected to hit a whopping $360 billion by 2030. Instead of spending decades building up desktop computer infrastructure and physical bank branches on every corner, Indonesia jumped straight into the smart mobile revolution. This directly birthed super apps like Gojek and instantly brought millions of unbanked citizens right into a dynamic modern economy. Which brings us to Section 4, the key factors behind Asia's success. Let's look at the actual foundation of this massive leap.
Now, what's really interesting about these points is that this success wasn't some historical accident. It was highly orchestrated. Why did they succeed? First, the late mover advantage. They could just buy the newest tech right off the shelf. Second, really strong government direction. Third, massive young populations. Fourth, crazy investments in STEM education. And fifth, a cultural laser focus on achievement.
All right, Section 5, Forward Steps for Developing Nations. This is the climax of our analysis today. This is the playbook for the future, specifically tailored as a guide for developing nations who want to accelerate their own modern economic growth. Here is the ultimate blueprint. Step 1. Invest heavily in digital connectivity first. The internet is literally the railway of the 21st century. Step 2. Skip those intermediate industrial steps. Don't waste your capital building someone else's past. Step 3. Build human capital through STEM, because let's face it, technology is useless without the human brains to run it. And Step 4. Governments need to step up and guide the markets with strong policies. If you apply these steps, you can compress decades of development into just a few short years. Make no mistake, the 21st century is the Asian century. That 200-year head start the West had, it's been completely neutralized. And you know why? Because these Asian nations didn't just break the old economic rules. They literally grabbed the pen and wrote brand new ones. And that leaves us with one incredibly provocative question to think about today. Which countries will be smart enough to follow Asia's example? Does your nation have the courage to grab this cheat code and leap straight into the future? Think about it. Thanks so much for joining me for this breakdown today, and I'll catch you in our next deep dive.